Halstead Telephone Company and R&J Broadcasting Incorporated is proud to present to you this broadcast on yourliveevent.com.
Hello and welcome in to the yourliveevent.com Robotics Show here this week on yourliveevent.com. As always, we are powered by Enbridge, and this week got a great show for you guys. Of course, take a look back at the year that was here when it comes to robotics, especially. Going to be joined by Curtis Robertson as well of the NMRC to talk about this year. As well as going forward, we're going to get into that here in just a bit too, as well as our conversation with Shelly Grove as well, longtime referee in first. And so we're going to get a chance to talk with her quite a bit, as well as see her takeaway. She was over at Worlds, or as Champs, as she calls it as well. So we're going to get a chance to talk with her as well. But going to start things off talking about the year that was with Curtis Robertson, sitting down with our own Jack. Here's their conversation as well for this week's edition of the yourliveevent.com Robotics Show.
Welcome back to the Your Live Event Robotics Show. I'm here with Curtis. Curtis is typically here representing Team 44 AE UC Robotics. Today is actually kind of interesting because, like I said before, we've definitely talked before, but I don't know if we've really had a chance to talk with when you have the vice president of the NMRC hat on. So this is really, really interesting. Now, with that being said, and before we get started, obviously, how you doing?
Oh, it's going well, actually. Kind of on the tail end of the season for me, and winding down, and something we talked with off camera, and that's happening actually tomorrow is the state event. So I'm gearing up actually to leave in the morning to head to there to cheer on some of our NMRC teams, but also wear my other hat as president of the Coaches Association, also there. So doing multitasking.
Absolutely. So, and you brought up states. We'll get to that in a little bit here, because I think it's kind of a perfect way to kind of start this with a wee bit of a season in review as, vice president and coach, and having many other hats, as you said before. How do you think this season has kind of gone for, the Northern Robotics, the Northern Minnesota Robotics Conference?
Bit of mouthfuls all the time. I get it. It's one of those things. So all things considered, like looking at the conference as a whole, I would truthfully say that it has been a very good learning season. A lot of growth happened amongst many of our teams collectively, from a lot of the coaches and even some of the students I've talked with at different events, between not only my own regional, but like week 0, and also on follow-up calls with some of the other mentors and coaches. There's been some exponential growth, you could say, in knowledge, particularly how to do different things that teams have not experienced before. I don't recall exactly if there was really major discussion on it, but there were a number of teams that tackled particular drivetrain this year across the entirety of the state, not just the conference, and that's called the Swerve Drive.
Yes.
And it is a mechanical challenge on its own to make sure you have all your components in the right spot, but also on the software side, the program side of it, it is a very steep learning curve, not only to just code it, but then also when you're on the field, drive it. So it has 3 full components behind it, but that was a significant challenge for many teams, not just here in the conference, but also in the rest of the state. But, from the teams I've talked with and from the coaches' perspective, this was an exciting year, I feel. At the start, we kind of looked at the game and scratched our heads going, this is probably going to be kind of boring because there's not going to be a lot really happening. But I was pleasantly surprised because it was very engaging. It was very exciting to watch. And truthfully, out of my experience in the past seasons and such, I feel like the end game this year wasn't as cliffhanger-ish as you could say, like the end game difficulty side of it, as other seasons. But it doesn't mean it wasn't viable and it wasn't a good thing to do. It just, once you get down to the last 2-3 seconds of the match, most teams are fairly balanced, especially the first ones. And so, like, I don't know. There were a few matches that you could definitely hear major roars occur, especially as the buzzer goes and the robots hit level. But those were kind of few and far between. Most of them were pretty well set by that 5-second mark and just hands off and sit and watch. But as far as general gameplay goes, it was mechanically a difficult challenge to pick pieces up, not only from the sidewall, but also from the floor if you chose to pick up from the floor. But a driving challenge because you had to traverse from one side and back, watch out for your partners, watch out for your opponents, make space for your, like, there was enough going on that I feel it was a very good, and I emphasized this already, a very good growth year coming off of last year, bringing us out of the COVID pandemia, bringing us all together, utilizing just the large tennis balls to shoot in an upper and a lower hoop. This time you added a technically difficult piece or pieces, there's the two of them, and you made it more of a skill challenge on placement than anything. And it was very worthwhile in my eyes. And I'm truthfully kind of hopeful and excited for next year's challenge also at this rate.
You mentioned kind of this, it's the second year since, the pandemic, everything else like that.
Yep.
Now, before the season started and the game kind of was announced, was that kind of being brought into mind? Like, hey, last year with, and again, last year was my first introduction to robotics. So, like, to me, again, I'm just going to say, like, it was a shooting game. I don't remember what it was physically called.
Yep.
Was this year more of a emphasis on, like, hey, we're actually fully back now. We're kind of getting back into the swing of things when it comes to normal life, or this is what normal life is now. However you want to look at it.
Right.
Yeah. Was it, hey, kind of gates are opening, we can kind of do whatever we want, or is it like, okay, no, we still have to do X, Y, Z?
So actually, even so, I'll take what your statement is from last year. Coming out of the pandemic, I feel last year's game was actually a really good starter, you could say, for many teams that lost that experience. They lost those seniors and those juniors who had the building experience, that had the knowledge base initially. And we lost them just because they graduated. They moved on to greener pastures, whatever it might be. And then to come out of it with very few skills, very few abilities or potential social distancings and otherwise, with schools that didn't actually meet in session, to now, hey, we're back all together. I feel last year's game was very good to get people back on the field to start developing some of those basic skills. Everybody had the same game piece. There were only the two goals, and it was a fairly wide open field. You had the end game of climbing monkey bars, but I mean, that's not something you had to emphasize or focus on if you didn't want to. And so I felt last year was a good, like, first step, getting us back together, getting us on the right track to a more difficult. And then when you enter this year's competition, I feel they skipped the next and just went to the third step right away. Because for me as a veteran coach and like a member of the conference and otherwise, it's just one of those things, like, picking up a traffic cone is not easy. And it really offered a challenge because we've had a number of years where it's been balls, a little spherical object, and you could use very similar manipulators or objects to pick things up as you have in the past. But a traffic cone? Like, okay, really? How? What? Wait. And so problem solving wise, that was fabulous. And I love it. And it really elevated the gameplay for not only your mechanical design, but then when you get to the competition size, it really also leveled up your drive competition too. Because not only do you have to be fast to cycle back and forth, but you also got to have like situational awareness. Where's my partners? Do I have to make space for them? Do I have to get out of the way so they can get through because they're cycling a little better than us and we take a little bit of strategies and other things that we've talked about before. But in terms of progression, I feel it was fantastic. And I loved it just because it was a technically difficult game for the mechanic side of it. Gameplay wise, it's simple. Pick up the game piece from the opposite side of the field, bring it back, place it on one of 3 different areas. Seems simple enough until you start it and doing it and being precise and such. And so it was a good skill builder. We took coming back together, trying to figure out, okay, how do we be a team again? To now, all right, we're leveling up our challenges. How do we make this better? How do we accelerate our learning and our capabilities as teams to improve and progress?
And you said something there, and it had me laughing because I remember having a conversation with Mac and talking about, like, they were literally a few months ago playing basketball with robots. Now they have this whole, like you said, it seems like they skipped like 3 levels to be like, okay, now we're doing this. And I was like,
yep,
this is crazy. And it's so funny that you brought up, well, obviously you guys lived it.
Right.
Where the first thing I was like, man, this is really complicated. I was like, whoa, just design wise, like picking up that cone versus, and again, I didn't realize that it's a beach ball. It's a blow up pool toy for that cube thing.
Pretty much.
And I'm like, just being able to be like, yeah, no, for the cone, grab it this hard. When we're going to pick up a cube, if we grab it that hard, it's probably gonna pop or something.
Exactly.
So it is funny to see, like, it wasn't just me. Again,
no,
somebody that I'm glad everybody else thought that was really difficult, because outside looking in, it looked impossible.
As far as years past, and now we're talking pre-COVID and pre-pandemia and such, like in terms of challenge, like this really leveled it up. And my team started in 2013, and we had progressively gotten better. Our initials were, again, struggles with drivetrain, getting the thing to move. And then we progressively have gotten better and better. And I feel like this has been the reset button, doing that, but on a higher, like a little bit more beefier diet, like a higher tier in that fashion from when we had first started. And so it's kind of refreshing for me as a mentor also to really help these new kids who haven't had that experience before, really get in there and go, okay, this is a thing. Like, how do we really solve this problem now? So it's been awesome, and I love it. And as I said, I'm excited for next year. I really am.
I have a question about next year,
sure,
shortly, but now, which you talked very glowingly, at least very glowingly, when it comes to the difficulty and the positives of this game that you guys played this year. Did you actually like this game? Is this the type of game that's like, yeah, no, this is totally my bag? Or is it more like, oh no, I want to be shooting a basketball or shooting something through something?
For me, as a coach, as a mentor, I like this game. At first I was like, this is going to be easy. What do we, no, initial conceptions were completely wrong. And as I said, I was first thinking, okay, fans are going to be sitting in the stands like, oh, he went and got in a cone. Cool. He went and got it over. Like, no, it was definitely not that. And that was awesome. So from a spectator standpoint, I feel this game was very exciting to watch in my eyes. From a coaching standpoint, it was technically difficult, and it was fun to build and do and help the students create. As far as
Restock on food, fuel, and baits at locally owned Station 371 on Highway 371 in Pine River. Station 371 has bait and tackle, quality Cenex gasoline, off-road diesel, and is the only stop with #1 diesel. Make sure to stop by to wash off the sand and salt with their indoor car wash, open when the temp is at least 26 degrees. They'll hook you up with your fishing and hunting licenses too. Station 371 on Highway 371 in Pine River. Thank you for supporting local business.
Let's get real. Get ready for a place that's big enough to grow and small enough to care. The University of Minnesota Crookston offers more than 35 majors, minors, and certificates. Earn a University of Minnesota degree, where you can make a difference in a close-knit community. Faculty become friends and friends feel like family. You don't need a big city, just big dreams. The University of Minnesota Crookston. Real, hands-on, and will get you ready for anything.
And welcome back into the YourLiveEvent.com Robotics Show here, powered by Enbridge. I'm Mac Robinson. Appreciate the conversation with Curtis Robertson. Of course, Mac Robinson here. Going to have a conversation coming up with referee Shelly Grove. So I got a chance to talk with her and her time this year going to different regional events, as well as going down to Houston, Texas for Worlds. Here's my conversation with Shelly Grove. Coming back here on the YourLiveEvent.com Robotics Show, of course, powered by Enbridge. But joining us now, once again, is going to be referee Shelly Grove. And Shelly, we talked to you earlier on in the season now, and now we're here in May at this point. I got to ask you, as we're taking a look back at this season so far, you know, for you, what's it been like? You know, obviously, I know you're well-traveled as a referee. So, you know, how has this season really been at this point?
It has absolutely been amazing. I mean, from what I told you at my last interview, you know how I said that the game never plays out the way I think it's going to play. It ended up being a lot more exciting than what I was anticipating. It was just amazing to see how many different configurations there are to the robot and how many different ways the kids can manipulate it. And the different matches were totally exciting. I mean, I'm just coming down off a high because I just came back from champs. So it was a fun year. Took a little bit of a turn because the Minnesota North Star event actually moved. It usually is at 3M at Mariucci, and they moved it to La Crosse, Wisconsin. So that was a little bit of a change compared to last year. But overall, it's been a fantastic year.
And with that being said too, I mean, just talk about champs a little bit, and you know what that experience was like for you. And I know we don't have the shelf that you have with all your collections that you've had over the years, but you know, what was that like for you? Obviously, when it came to this season.
It was a lot more chaotic than it was the previous year. The main difference is that previously they had 6 different fields, or 6 divisions is what they call them. This year there were 8. So there were a lot more students, a lot more volunteers. And if anybody's ever seen or have been to the George R. Brown Convention Center, we had to actually get a statistic on one of the city tours and finding out that convention center, it is 11 city blocks long, and FRC took up the entire first floor.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was chaos. So I don't know if you've been able to see any of the postings from people who were there. We had a record-breaking attendance. It was about 50,000 in attendance.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, with that being said too, you know, I mean, for you, there's so many different events that you've gone to this year as well. You know, obviously everybody has favorites. I'm not going to ask you to pick one. I feel like that's asking for your favorite kid. But, you know, when it came to these events this year, especially, you know, what were some of your favorite takeaways and different experiences from all of them?
The best experience I can tell you, which really, it still melts my heart to hear this. During the practice matches at the La Crosse, Wisconsin event, there were a few, shall we say, very intense matches, and these are only practice matches. What happened during one of the later practice matches is in the day is that a team ended up pulling off an arm off of a robot that was on their alliance. They were working with them, and I'm saying they pulled it completely off. Okay, you know, it tend to happen, right? However, I'm standing next to the field, and the very first thing I hear as soon as the buzzer goes is that the students from the robot that took the arm off, they go to their to this team and say, "Don't worry, we will help you fix it."
Oh my gosh.
That is the very definition of cooperation and gracious professionalism. So that was the coolest moment this season.
I mean, that's got to be up there, especially too. And you know, the other side of it too is that, and I've talked about this with so many different teams, but you know, getting a chance to see, you know, at least for those teams, they get to see so many different designs, everything like that, depending on where they end up at. But for you as a referee, you also, you know, you have the unique position of being able to go to these different events. You get a chance to see all these different robots come in. And so in your eyes, you know, what were some of your favorite designs that you saw, and maybe even some of the more unique approaches that you as a referee got a chance to see from some of these teams this year?
I'll take that and I'll answer that in two parts. The coolest designs I thought, and of course, this always goes to thinking, you know, outside the box. Remember, during Endgame, you expect to have all three robots up on the charge pad and level, right? Well, they only make that charge pad so wide. So depending on what the footprint is on your robot, it's kind of hard to get all three robots up on that. Okay. In the end, there were a lot of alliances that were doing it, but what I didn't see this in the Minnesota regionals, but at champs, I was able to see a robot that didn't drive up onto it at all. It came around the side and flipped over on the side to get up off. I thought that, and then I remember during one of the matches that I was at an angle where I didn't see that happen because it was on the far side. So I thought only two robots were on the charge pad. My fellow referee who was opposite me saying, "No, you have to correct that." Because
oh my gosh.
Off the ground, I just can't see it. And that's why there's more than one official, because we can't see every angle that's going on. Another one that I thought was very unusual is there were some smaller robots that with their swerve drive were very zippy when it comes to going across the field and grabbing the game pieces. But some of them didn't actually take the time to go either over the charge pad or around it. What they did was that they came up to the charge pad, they dropped their antenna so that some piece of the robot was in the community zone, and they were chucking the game pieces from there. So that way they didn't have to drive all the way in. They would chuck them there and then either allow their alliance partners to place the game pieces, or they chuck like so many and then they come back and place them themselves.
Oh my gosh, that's such an interesting way to go about it, especially too.
It was fun to watch.
Oh, I bet at that point. I mean, if I'm in your shoes, I'm just asking for popcorn at that point. I mean, I'm just waiting to see how all of that comes in. And then, you know, the other side of it too is that, you know, I got a chance to see you up at Grand Forks over there as well for the regional event there as well. But, you know, we've talked about it in the past, but you got a chance to do Worlds this year as well. You know, what's the Worlds competition like, and what you saw this year? And the other side of it too, like, how does it compare to something like champs, like you talked about that you just experienced there as well?
Not exactly sure what you're asking. You're asking how do I compare the regionals to champs, or what's the question?
No. I'm saying Worlds. And
I refer to it as champs.
Oh, okay. All right. My fault. See, blame that on. That's on me.
Yeah.
So yeah. Champs.
From the spectators' perspective, they call it Worlds. From the volunteer perspective, we call it champs.
Okay. See, and you know what? Here, I'll go ahead. Just write that down. Champs. Equals Worlds. Okay, see, you learn something new every day. See, Shelly, this is why I appreciate you having. This is why I appreciate having you on. So, you know, when it comes to, you know, those types of experiences too, and you know, we talked briefly. I know you were extremely busy at regionals. I know that you were kind of directing traffic along with being one of those lead officials too. But you know, for you having that experience as well, what's that kind of like? And kind of take us into, you know, for you and your perspective, you know, being one of those lead officials that help kind of direct traffic. And, you know, as you mentioned, you know, the chaos of Worlds or champs, you know, the chaos of that compared to, you know, some of the chaos that you might see on the smaller scale in terms of regionals.
It's the same type of chaos, only maybe a little bit more fast, maybe. I know one of the things I really loved about being at Champs, and I remember this too. It was during one of the first days, and remember, we've got teams from all over the world. So when I was on the near side, I actually one of the near side tablets. I went over to the Alliance and start. Sometimes I like to chit chat with the students because they're a little on the hyper side, and I'm trying to calm them down and say, hey, just enjoy the moment, kind of thing. I ended up speaking to a team from Australia. And
Okay.
so much fun. So then I actually started, it's like, so how long a trip did you make to get here? And that was actually one of the questions during the closing ceremonies, is that everybody, okay, how long did it take for you to get here? Was it an hour? Was it 2 hours? Was it 24 hours? So it was kind of fun to see that exactly how far some of these people came. So that's the big difference with Champs. With the regionals, my favorite part is, especially when I go to Grand Forks, to me, it's like coming home. That is the place where I grew up. And that's a lot of the teams that participate are from, they're from Wardo, they're from Greenbush, Roseau. I know all these kids. So I have to admit, by far, Grand Forks has got to be my favorite event.
Okay. And, another thing too, we talked about it a little bit. Obviously, we talked earlier in the season as well, but and I've talked about this with students in the past as well, but, from a referee perspective, from your perspective, and getting a chance to see how the games have played out in previous years compared to this year, what do you think were some of the underrated aspects of this year's games that, might have gone a little bit unnoticed and at least early on, that might have played a bigger factor than some people anticipated?
One of the things I did see that I guess from a point perspective that I found it unusual that a lot of teams didn't take advantage of is when they programmed their robot during autonomous to back up and then level on the charge pad. We actually found it odd. I mean, what they do is that they score a game piece first and then they back up to the charge pad and then just level out, right? We did find it odd that they wouldn't drive all the way out of the community zone and come back because that's more points. So I find it very hard to that there were some teams that didn't take advantage of that. I mean, it'd be worthwhile for you to back out without scoring a game piece. It'd be more worthwhile to back all the way out of the community zone and back in. You gain more points, whereas you're only gaining 1 point scoring the game piece.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because again, I almost feel like at that point, if you're talking about the game piece, it's almost like a little bit of a distraction. A little bit. It's obviously the more tangible part that you can actually see. But then, like you said, if you get out of that community zone, come back in at that point, you're getting more points out of that. So, that at that point, that's where it's like you as a referee, you understand the rules, you understand where the points are going to be made in there too. And that's also where it's like, hey, you can see when certain teams are, reading into the little details and maybe going about it in that sense.
Yeah, and what was really exciting too, I don't know if you caught wind of this, but they upped the game a little bit going into Champs.
Really?
There were so many teams that were filling the grid, and I mean by that, there's 27 game pieces that fill the grid. There were so many people who were doing that they upped the ante, and then if you start putting extra game pieces on the same nodes, you supercharge them.
Really?
Yep. So that would get you even more points. My aspect of that is that they were attempting to reduce the amount of ties because without the supercharge aspect, the flat out the highest game you can get point wise is 193. You get 183, and there were so many teams that were approaching that. So they had to do something with that.
Okay. Interesting. And, Shelly, the other side of it too, well, we talked, when we talked earlier in the year, we talked about how, you got involved. We talked about how, you ended up getting your husband involved and, the more and more, basically just pulling people in one by one, just robotics is just pulling in the whole family. Yep. And it's my understanding that you brought your sister in as well, your sister, Cheryl Grove, and Cheryl.
No, her name is Cheryl Gilroy.
Cheryl Gilroy. There we go. Okay. Got you. Thank you. So yeah, there you go. So Cheryl, you got Cheryl involved, and it's my understanding you got Cheryl with you.
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right, Cheryl. One, thank you for joining us here on the YourLiveEvent.com robotics show. And Cheryl, what was the conversation like with Shelly to get involved in all of this as well, and kind of what really brought you into it?
Stemming from, I believe it was 2018 when her daughter last competed in robotics in her senior year in high school. I was out visiting and she took me to the state, which was in Minneapolis, and I was able to witness it then. And I believe the year after is when you got involved as a volunteer. It was
2019 was my first year.
Yeah. And when she first started getting involved, she kept reiterating to me, okay, Cheryl, you have to get involved with this. This is so much fun. Like, you have to do it. And it's near you. Go out and go to a regional event or a district event. Once you get on there, you're going to be hooked. I have since, watched every single game that has happened since 2018. My favorite, I think, is Steamworks.
Steamworks was kind of fun. Yeah, she's my biggest supporter, because what she does when I'm at one of these regionals, when they introduce the referees, for instance, at the beginning of the competition, she's the one getting the video for me so I can see it later, kind of a thing.
What's interesting about the whole thing about FIRST Robotics is that it is globally known, and I find that is as equally as interesting for nerds to get involved. And I see that in a kind term. Nerds and geeks have a place to compete, just like athletes do. They work together and fight together towards a common goal. And they find such camaraderie in it. Now, here's a cool story, if hopefully that Shelly doesn't mind me sharing about this. When I was working the Georgian district, I had the opportunity to interview players, mentors, judges. One of the program directors was there, and he was headed to Worlds. I had a good conversation with him saying, when you go down to Worlds, look for my face and say hi to my sister for me. It's the connections that are made really cool. One of the interviews that I made was a team, Makeshift Robotics, I think was it Makeshift?
Which story are you talking about?
The two kids that I interviewed.
That's Inverse Paradox.
Inverse Paradox. Inverse Paradox was the team that I interviewed after they had qualified for the finals that particular day. And they were such good buddies, and they were so excited to be a part of the whole thing. They were so excited. They were hugging each other, and they were, the enthusiasm was intoxicating and addictive to listen to them talk about it. I love to see kids involved like that and be so passionate about whatever it is they're passionate about. I did this interview and told my sister about this interview that I made. This team did end up going to the Worlds. My sister knew who they were, sought them out, talked to them, and said, "You talked to my sister back in Barrie, Ontario." And I think it's cool. We're talking about Barrie, Ontario to Houston, Texas, and how it's cool how it just brings so many like-minded people together in such a fantastic aspect. I have yet to get involved as a volunteer. I only witnessed that particular thing for a day. I think that with the enthusiasm so far that my sister's given me, I think it's inevitable that you might disown me in the end. But I love the atmosphere about the whole FIRST Robotics thing. It's amazing. And I think it's nice that these kids who have such a love for science have an outlet that they can cooperate with each other, meet new people, meet people from around the world, exchange ideas. And like I overheard her talking about a team that broke somebody else's arm. They went in and assisted to help them to fix it. You don't find that in regular sports. They usually want to make sure that they beat the other team, that they fall. In this particular case, it's about alliancing and coming together and working towards a common goal. And that's why I love it so much.
And see, that's the kind of stuff that I love to hear too. And like you said, I mean, just that camaraderie, especially, and the fact that it's one common goal. You hit the nail on the head. It's intoxicating. It's addictive, and I've said this to Shelly before too, and I mentioned it at the regional event too. But I almost feel like calling it an event is almost underselling it because of the way that everybody comes together and just the kind of energy that you have surrounding those kids too.
Yeah. It's very much an understatement. And I, for one, would like to get people more involved, especially since, people think that, ooh, robotics, geeky, really, how exciting can I possibly be? I mean, you know what? Watch one event and then tell me if you think the same way.
Yeah, and I completely wholeheartedly agree. And Cheryl, I got to ask you here too, because, as somebody who does these interviews quite a bit, there's always a few answers that you're always going to remember and that you always bring up with other people as well, whether it's, wholesome, or even if it's just a funny answer that you'll get from a kid. Just one from me when I was interviewing some of the students over in Alexandria. We interviewed the mascots, and the one was wearing the wolf. I think it was the Husky Howlers, but the one was wearing the wolf head. And we were asking him what he thought about the day, and his answer was woof. And so, it's, you always just remember just some of the funny answers, and even, talking with some of the students that went down to Worlds, and the fact that they played an entire D&D game on the way down and played a one-shot campaign. So, like, for you, do you have any favorite answers that you got from some of the interviews that you had?
Favorite answers? I don't remember anything that was off the wall funny or like that, but when I asked about what's your favorite part about all of this, the answers always seem to be centered around the same thing, and it's having a passion for what you're doing together as a team. Whether it was the judges I spoke to a ref and asked what his experiences were, talking to the program director, talking to the students. It was all about working together towards a common goal. The interview is the first time I've done an event like that with Rogers Television. I do volunteer, like my sister. I volunteer with the community in a different way. I work on the broadcast side, and I do local OHL hockey broadcasts. But I was very excited about this because it was something I knew about. And interviewing these people was something different that I hadn't done before. And getting everybody's take on it, and understanding what's involved that goes into all of these events. There's a ton of planning that goes into all of these, a ton of organization, and a lot of it is done voluntarily. They're not paid for, which means they all have to have a passion to do it and work together as a team to get something done. And in the end, it can only be a positive outlook, especially when it comes to the goals that our youth set for themselves, how they believe in themselves, and how they come together and create networks moving forward in their lives, whatever they do after they're done.
Cheryl, Shelley, thank you so much for joining me this week on the YourLiveEvent.com Robotics Show. This is you talk about the energy. This is the kind of energy I like. This is the kind of energy that we appreciate here on the Robotics Show. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
This year, Schrupp Excavating is celebrating 40 years of digging it right. With this milestone year, Schrupp Excavating wants to thank all of their past, current, and future employees and customers. They appreciate all you've done to help Schrupp Excavating become one of the most trusted companies in the Lakes area. For any excavation project, Schrupp Excavating will have your project done right and on time, serving Pine River, Bacchus, Pequot Lakes, and all the surrounding communities. Schrupp Excavating LLC. Online at schruppexcavating.com. The PRB Boosters are happy to sponsor coverage of the Tigers. Like them on Facebook for events and fundraisers. The PRB Boosters could use your help. Be part of great events and fundraisers, all built to give back and present more opportunities for the students of Pine River Bacchus schools. For information or to get started, email prboosterclub1.com. Meetings are the first Monday of every month at 6 p.m. at the school. Good luck, Tigers, from the PRB Boosters.
Always appreciate the conversation with Shelley, and also getting a chance to talk with Cheryl here on the YourLiveEvent.com Robotics Show. But now we're going to turn things over as we go ahead and go back to Jack, sitting down with Curtis Robertson, of course, talking about states in Minnesota, the state competition, as well as talking about the future with robotics right here.
A little bit of, not fast forward, it's tomorrow.
Sure.
Right? So tomorrow is states.
Yes.
For you guys. Now, anything, unfortunately, I do not believe 4480 is participating.
Yeah, it happens. That's how life rolls. We've only qualified once, and that was the year of COVID. So, so we were doing the at-home challenge. We qualified for state, but we couldn't go to state, if that makes sense. So it's one of those things. It's how life rolls. It is one of our actual goals to attend it eventually, but keep on going. Sorry.
Now, so being vice president, everything else,
Sure.
I'm guessing you're going, and what are you looking to do there?
Yeah. So I'll start first in regards to First Robotics has regional events, which is everyone in the world can attend, or other states can attend our events to compete and participate in this game. But teams from Minnesota qualify for state based on their first regional attendance. So depending on how you ranked, if you won, did you do X, did you receive awards, that type of deal. There's a giant mathematical formula, you could say, to determine who qualifies for state. And to go a little bit further, the state, are trying to equalize participation from all sides of the state. And in order to do so, they adopted the Minnesota Robotics Coaches Association's section alignment. So there are, at minimum, 2 teams from every section of the state attending state also.
Oh, okay.
So I think this year there are, let's see, so if we have the 16 teams plus then any official winners of regional events, and then it kind of goes to a wild card. Whoever scored highest following ends up participating at the state level.
Okay. So just so I understand. So there's guaranteed ways of doing it. Those would be like you said, like winners of
the regional events. Yep.
Regional events.
You're welcome.
Getting a certain amount of points
based on your rankings and your play. Yep.
Exactly. And then there's kind of like wild cards, like, oh yeah, I know this guy's this team's getting in, this team's getting in. This thing.
Very much so. Yeah. So it's the winners. Then you got the top 2 in each section, and then it goes to the rules of Thunderdome. So we'll top down from there after that. And so with that being said, tomorrow is state. There are 36 teams attending this year at the University of Minnesota. It's held in Williams Arena. Officially, opening ceremonies and the gates open right about 8:15, 8:30 area, and they'll do all of the qualification matches till right about 12:30. They'll have the lunch, and then they dive right into a little bit more of qualification rounds and alliance selections leading into playoffs following. And so looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing not only the teams that are participating from the NMRC, but also a lot of the teams. This year, UC Robotics wasn't actually in the state of Minnesota competing. And so we kind of missed the camaraderie of seeing some of the other teams we usually do at the other regional events. And so it'll be nice to touch base not only with some of the coaches and mentors, but to see how they've grown throughout the year as well further.
Now, anything anything special going on at states? I know I'm trying to remember the announcer for Grand Forks. He was fantastic. I forgot. Horrible with names, but anything.
That's all great.
Yeah, anything special going on for states that maybe wasn't going on for other events, or is it just
so? To go with what you asked about, like anything specific for the state event that would be different from the regional? Well, the biggest thing is it's only the state of Minnesota attending this. And so that part's really nice. And it's great because one thing that's unique, especially about Minnesota, is our state high school league actually recognizes robotics as a sport. And so that part is wonderful because our students can receive lettering capabilities off of it. And now they also can receive state championships, which is what this is for, first, second, third. But moreover, with our Minnesota Robotics Coaches Association, our affiliation with the State High School League and the Coaches Association allows us to do additional awards that are not typically seen in the other states also, but are seen in the other sports. So, for example, and this year something new that our Coaches Association is handing out at state is going to be the All-State awards. And you hear all-state team members from like football or basketball, all-state quarterback, all-state linebacker, all-state point guards, that type of deal. This year's our first year we're rolling out all-state for robotics. And so we as an association are super excited to actually honor and provide the recognition some of these students really do deserve for their contributions on a team. And so we're honoring 18 students. I'm not going to say any of them at this point in time because nobody knows but those kids and that one coach. So we're going to leave it at that until the honors are actually shared at state. But we're also going to honor like our coaches of the year. So the Coaches Association recognize 2 coaches from each section of Minnesota. So 16 coaches will be honored. And then we are also rolling out, this will be our second year, doing a Hall of Fame for the state of Minnesota. Oh. And the Hall of Fame represents a coach or a member who has really dedicated time and efforts to growing FIRST, to really make FIRST Robotics happen in Minnesota. And so last year we inducted technically 4 individuals. It was 3. We had one that was a couple. And so actually Olaf and Kay Netteberg were honored as Hall of Fame members last year by the Coaches Association. So you've seen them from 3102 TNT Techno Tigers. But this year we are inducting 2 more individuals into the Hall of Fame, and it's very well deserved. Let's put it that way. So.
Oh, fantastic. No, that is awesome. I love, I'm a sucker for that stuff with the Hall of Fame awards, all that stuff. When you can give somebody their flowers, you know.
Oh, 100%.
Definitely be able to do that. Now, fast forwarding.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
You brought up, you mentioned, you didn't bring up anything when it comes to next year or anything like that. But when it comes to next year, anything that is gonna come up around the corner that maybe that might be a big change or something kind of minute?
Well, the big thing I could say is when Worlds occurred just the other week, they actually announced the new theme for next year. So this year's theme was energized. And so everything was energy related or focused on as a thematic element.
Sure.
Next year's theme is actually called First in Show. And it's a little bit more of an artistic approach on the gameplay and the themes of the individual sequences. And so like First Lego League, First Tech Challenge, and also First Robotics will have a theme revolvent around arts this time around. And they've announced the names of each of those. And the name of next year's First Robotics competition is actually called Crescendo, like increasing volume of music. And so I'm intrigued as to what that really means. They only just had a general splash video of like talking about the arts and how it's important in life and what it really means. And then they announced the titles. And so there's been talk, there's been discussion, and one of the forums that coaches and students and otherwise can go online to is called Chief Delphi. And there's already a giant thread talking about, what do you think next year's game is actually going to be like? And so people are just, pulling out the tinfoil hats, going to town and looking like Charlie Day, pointing at everything, trying to make it all make sense. So
wow, that is really cool, because you said it, I was like, man, oh, cool, arts. I was like, well, when you said First in Show, I was like, oh, it's going to be like the Westminster Dog Show. And
yeah, that was my first thought too. Westminster Dog Show.
Here's my robot. Everything else. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of like hilarious if that's what's up. But like, no. Now the only thing I'm imagining is just teams just building something that like the Blue Man Group would sit and bang all their stuff on.
I have kind of nonchalantly perused the forums, and there are allusions to like Guitar Hero or Rock Band being on there, like having teams doing like synchronized rhythms or such. Now, will that actually be it? Don't know, but That'd be an intriguing concept, play a giant game of Simon where you got to hit the rhythms at the right time in the right locations or otherwise. Don't know. And First is really good about giving you a name and giving you just enough to make the brain cells go, what could that really be? And then they'll launch a teaser, and the teaser usually comes around right around registration time, September, October. In my experience with the teasers, there's really not a lot you can glean off of it, but there's a lot more speculation, and they typically fuel the flames for a water game. And I don't know how or why that came to be, but everybody wants a water game. And it just sounds fun, but I don't really think it's going to be very practical in that essence. So it's just kind of the running joke with everything. And there's a lot of obscure ways to confirm a water game for the future that people will come out with, but it's fun. And I love the enthusiasm that not only the Minnesota kids have, but the kids around the world are sharing for this program.
And again, it really has been so cool to witness.
Yeah.
Now, before I let you go,
sure.
One last question. When, in your eyes, Vice President of the Minnesota Robotics Conference, 2022-2023 season energized.
Yep.
What is going to be the big standout for this season in your eyes?
I think the big standout is kind of what I emphasized this last at the beginning of our interview here in our discussion, the growth, truthfully, from a lot of the teams. Seeing teams willing to try and tackle challenges they would have never considered before. One of the essence I talked about was swerve drives. Many took on major programming challenges. Many took on vision tracking or the capabilities of building a very complex manipulator or grabber system or whatever it might be. And there's others that are just looking at getting kids involved again. And so there has been growth. On my aspect, especially for my team, it was growth getting kids involved. And we really took an emphasis more on not so much the robot build side now with my new students, but more on the digital art side. I've got kids really interested and involved in trying to help with more visual arts and graphics and design and video and podcasting, you name it. And it's new to me. It's 11 years of a team, and I haven't really had anybody interested. And now I had 3-4 show up at the door like, hey, can I help? I want to do this. And it's awesome. So I would definitely, the big word is growth across the board.
No, that's awesome. That's all you can really hope for.
Definitely.
So I think that's awesome. Now, seriously, Curtis, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Definitely.
This has been fantastic. Always enjoy talking with you.
I appreciate it much, Jack. Thank you. Thank you.
With that being said, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
And of course, always appreciate the conversation. Always appreciate you guys for tuning in. Of course, YourLiveEvent.com Robotics Show, our season finale coming up next week right here on YourLiveEvent.com. Make sure you're subscribed, ring that notification bell for when we go live, as well as drop a like, leave a comment down below. What was your favorite event from this past year in robotics as well? And what are your favorite memories from this past year in robotics as well? But I want to say thank you to all of you. Say thank you to Enbridge, of course, for powering YourLiveEvent.com Robotics Show, as always. And we're going to go ahead and say, for Jack, I'm Mac. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll catch you next week.